Friend, what if we stopped trying to change, to grow, to evolve just for 2 weeks? What if we just stopped? No optimizing, no personality rewriting, or trying to become a better or next version of ourselves. What if we just observed? Hello, and welcome to Torches, Yoga, and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, and I'll be your coach. If you are curious about mindfulness, healing, and practical habits that actually work, you're in the right place. Because here we focus on simple but powerful practices grounded in ancient wisdom and modern science to care for both our minds and bodies. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. So there is something I have noticed about and in our growth culture. When we are in that phase, we are constantly in improvement mode. We are constantly focused on fixing the reactivity, the procrastination, the overthinking, and the emotional waves. And sometimes we're so busy trying to improve ourselves that we never actually study ourselves. Like, what if we aren't broken, just unexamined? For the next 14 days, I want to invite you into something different. Not self improvement, but self discernment. Discernment is our present moment awareness applied to choice. It's the ability to pause long enough to see, if I do this, what happens? And if I don't, what happens? Not morally or philosophically, but practically. It's cause and effect. So for the next 2 weeks, we are going to become researchers of our own selves and our nervous systems. We're not pushing ourselves to get anything right, to be calm, or to choose perfectly. We are simply going to be tracking. Because what most of us are actually missing isn't the awareness. We see it, we get it. But the pattern recognition is what we're missing. Before I get too deep into talking about how we are going to conduct our 14-day experiment, I want to introduce a concept that quietly sits underneath all of this. There is a term in psychology called metacognition. It sounds really technical, but it's actually very simple. It just means we becoming aware of our thinking process, not the content of the thoughts, but the fact that thinking is happening at all. Most of the time, we are inside our thoughts. We identify with them and we see them as our whole story. If a thought says, I'm failing, we don't pause to examine it. We just feel like we are failing. Or if a wave of anxiety comes up, we don't notice the anxiety as a passing state. We just see ourselves as an anxious person. Metacognition is the subtle shift where instead of being the thought, we notice it. Instead of drowning in the emotion, we observe how it moves through our body, bringing different and changing sensations. It's not detachment in a cold way. It's perspective in a stabilizing way. Discernment is essentially metacognition brought into our everyday lives. It's taking just a half a step back from the swirl of reactions, impulses, and stories and saying, what is actually happening here? We're still participating in our lives, feeling the feelings and all, but we're not being completely swallowed up by them. And from that shift in position, choice becomes more clear. Not because we're forcing ourselves to be better, but because we can finally see the pattern that we were inside of. And that is the foundation of this 14-day experiment. So for the next 2 weeks, we're not going to fix ourselves trying to be more calmer or more spiritual, more disciplined, or more evolved. We are just studying. And we're going to do this by tracking a very few specific signals. When do I feel contraction or expansion? When does urgency show up in my body? What does it feel like when I'm forcing presence versus when clarity is neutral? And after I act, what actually happens? That's it. We're not analyzing every memory of childhood and adolescence. We're not rewriting our personality, and we're not setting new habits. We are just becoming observers of cause and effect in real time in our own lives. Because mostly, like I said, we don't actually lack the awareness, we lack the pattern recognition. And it's in that pattern recognition where discernment is born. So let's talk about those 4 signals that we're going to be observing. Signal number 1, we're starting with the body. Throughout your day, things happen. A text comes in, an email pops in, someone makes a request of you, or you need to make a decision. Before you react, explain, or answer, pause. Check into your body. It's going to be easier to start this practice and doing it in the mundane little moments of your day. Maybe like the first day or so, you do this check in when you're deciding what to wear or what to have for lunch. And later, you move to practicing in between bigger things or like interactions with others. It's a simple check in asking, what is our body doing? Contraction can be subtle. Maybe your chest or hips tighten, your breath shortens, or your shoulders lift up towards your ears, or your jaw firms up, or all of the above happen. There's a bracing quality, like your nervous system is preparing for impact. Expansion, on the other hand, feels different. It comes in our breath deepening without having to try. There's more space in your chest, our face softens, and your belly feels grounded instead of pulled in tight. There's room inside. Now, this is important to understand. Just like our present moment awareness practices, we're going to keep the judgment and commentary out of it. So, we aren't labeling these sensations as good or bad. Contraction is not inherently bad, just as expansion is not automatically good. Sometimes contraction is protection. Sometimes it's wisdom saying, ooh, slow down. And sometimes expansion can actually be avoidance disguised as freedom. So keep in mind, one isn't right and one isn't wrong. We're not labeling them. We are just tracking them. Because over time, patterns start to reveal themselves. You might notice that every time you say yes to a certain person, your body contracts. Or that every time you give yourself 20 minutes of alone time, you expand. We're collecting data, and data is powerful when we're trying to live skillfully. All right, signal number 2 is going to be urgency versus steadiness. Urgency is one of the trickiest signals we'll study in ourselves. It masquerades as clarity. Sometimes it sounds responsible and decisive, and it feels productive. But there's a different energy with it. It feels like I need to fix this right now. If I don't handle this, something bad will happen. Or maybe I have to immediately respond to this message. Or even the opposite of that one, and deciding that the message is just too much, and then we're just going to ignore it altogether. There's this pressure behind it, a tightening, like it's rushing us to take that option. Maybe it's even trying to convince us that it's the only option we have. Steadiness feels different. It might still recognize that something needs attention, but there's breath in it. There's space to choose timing, and there's no internal alarm blaring at us. Discernment asks a simple but powerful question. Is this true urgency, or am I trying to escape discomfort? Sometimes we act quickly not because something is actually wrong, but because sitting still with uncertainty feels intolerable. So we rush to decide, to fix, and to explain. For these 14 days, when urgency shows up, we're going to get curious. What's underneath it? Is it a fear of being judged? Is it ego protection? Embarrassment or impatience? And remember, we're not trying to fix anything. We're just collecting data. When we study urgency instead of obeying it, automatically we widen the space between impulse and action. And that space is where discernment lives. All right, signal number 3 that we are going to keep an eye out for is forcing presence versus natural presence. Sometimes we are trying so hard to be mindful that we are actually just controlling ourselves in a more socially acceptable way. We can inadvertently lean more into the conditioning. Forced presence feels like we are monitoring ourselves and correcting our thoughts, and like we're worried about breathing correctly, trying to be calm, trying to be evolved. There's this tight clenching effort. Natural presence feels quieter. We're not performing awareness, we're just here. engaged, but not micromanaging our internal world. There's less commentary and less self surveillance. If you catch yourself doing mindfulness, just notice. There's nothing wrong with effort. Growth requires effort. But discernment is noticing when effort tips into tension and when presence becomes another self improvement project. Natural clarity doesn't shout and it doesn't strain. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply feels steady. Okay, so far we have covered signal number one, which is contraction versus expansion in the body. Number two, which is urgency versus steadiness. And number three, which is forced presence versus natural presence. Signal four is the aftermath. This is where discernment deepens from theory into wisdom. After you make a decision, don't just move on, check in with the aftermath. Did that choice create more peace, or did it create more mental noise? Did it reduce harm or increase friction in your life? You might say yes to something and feel immediately relieved because you successfully avoided conflict in that moment. But a few hours later, resentment starts to creep in. That's information. You might avoid a hard conversation and feel temporarily safe, but later you feel uneasy about it. That's information. Discernment grows strongest in hindsight. You know what they say, hindsight is 2020, because only then can we see the ripple effects of our actions. When we start connecting choice to consequence, we don't need as much willpower to fight it. We have evidence. We can't address something we are not aware of. And like I always say, awareness comes before action, always. So I have crafted this 14-day self-experiment for you in a way that makes it simple and doable. And you can even squeeze it into the tightest of schedules. No 45-minute journaling sessions, no routine or personality overhauls. Just small, consistent moments of awareness. In the morning, before your day sweeps you away, take 1 minute. Ask yourself, what would skillful action look like today? Maybe that's listening before responding. Maybe that's taking a pause when someone asks something of you. And then ask yourself, what does my nervous system genuinely need today? Maybe that's a plan to get some gentle movement in before we rush into the day, or reminders to take a deep breath. If you leave a note by your pillow or a message on your bathroom mirror, you'll remember to take these 60-second check-ins. This minute is not when you start planning your day. It's when we are orienting ourselves for the day to move into it with purpose opposed to just reacting to whatever comes. Then midday, at any point that works best for you, maybe when you get to work or when you're leaving work. Like I said, whatever works. It doesn't have to be literal noon ritual, but midday. Before you make a decision, pause. Ask yourself, is my body contracting or is it expanding? Is this urgency or steadiness? Am I forcing presence or is clarity natural? Then choose as you normally would. This isn't about performing perfectly and getting it right. It's about honest self observation. And lastly, in the evening, spend 3 to 5 minutes reflecting. Where did I contract today? What didn't feel good? Where did I feel expansion today? And what felt right? What choices felt peaceful and which ones increased friction? And then review and see if there are any patterns starting to emerge. That's it. A morning 60-second check in, a midday signal check, and an evening reflection and review. Especially as a new practice, this can seem kind of daunting to remember all this and make sure we are addressing all these points every day for the next 14 days. So, I have broken them down into 2 weeks into 3 different sections. Each section has its own focus. Days 1 through 4 are about our body signals. Your only job is to learn the language of contraction and expansion. Don't stress about big life decisions, just build sensitivity to how your body's talking to you. Notice it in conversations while you're scrolling on your phone, while you're eating, resting, and working. We're just building fluency in our nervous systems, looking for those cues for the first 4 days. Days 5 through 9, we're going to shift towards urgency and impulse. Now we're studying our reaction speed. When do we rush? When do we defend? When do we jump in to fix something? We're not suppressing impulse, just giving ourselves a little space between the stimulus and our response. Even just one breath counts. And then day 10 through 14, we're going to focus on skillful action and cause and effect. Now we're looking at outcomes. Which actions genuinely stabilized your life and which ones created unnecessary friction? Not what feels good in the moment, but what brings us sustained peace over time. By the end of the 14 days, you won't just have moments of awareness. You'll have pattern recognition. And that is discernment. This entire process gently trains us to decenter the self, not in a dissociative way, but in an observational way. Instead of saying, I'm anxious, you begin to notice anxiety is here right now. Instead of, I'm bad at boundaries, you might observe, when I don't speak up, I feel contraction. That shift reduces shame. And when shame softens, clarity increases. Shame says, fix yourself. Discernment says, study the pattern. And when we study a pattern long enough, the next wise choice often becomes obvious. During this process, you may discover that some of your habits consistently increase friction in your life. Be kind to yourself, because that doesn't mean you're failing at anything. It means you're moving with purpose now, and you're becoming precise. Precision is powerful because it replaces vague criticism with specific awareness. You may also discover that some of the things you've been judging yourself for are not nearly as problematic as you thought. You may find some urgency is imagined, or that some issues are just unexamined reflexes. And that's great news. That's good news. That's growth without destruction. We're not trying to eliminate contraction, and we are not trying to live only in expansion. Remember, neither is inherently good or bad. And we're not trying to perfect ourselves in the next 14 days or ever, because we're perfect as we are. We are learning to trust cause and effect. Discernment is how awareness becomes choice. Awareness alone is interesting. Discernment is transformational. Because when we clearly see what creates peace in our lives and what creates harm, we don't need as much discipline, just honesty. So this experiment that we're doing now isn't just a lone singular practice. Earlier this month, you may remember we talked about handling difficult people, and we explored intuition versus impulse. That subtle difference between a quiet inner knowing and a nervous system spike. I have a guided meditation for you if you haven't seen it yet. But today, with this experiment, we step from that inner knowing into our discernment. Next week, we're going to talk about what happens when we stop forcing calm, and then we're going to look into how we can see when we are thinking our way through something when really the body needs to lead. These aren't random ideas just stacked on each other and just tossed out there. Collectively, with these practices, we are building our capacity to notice, discern, and act skillfully. So, my invitation to you for the next 14 days, become a scientist of your own nervous system. Be curious, neutral, and precise. And don't think you're going to feel fixed at the end of the 2 weeks. But you will be informed, and informed choice is power. If you're in, comment below day 1, and in the description below, I also have a Google Docs link where you can download a PDF tracker to help keep you going, and it offers some reminders on the 4 signals that we'll be tracking through our experiment. If you don't have a Google account or you have trouble accessing it, you can always just shoot me an email that says experiment tracker, and I will be glad to send it over to you. Friend, thank you so much for showing up for yourself today and for sharing that moment with me. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.